This is a sequel, continuation, to my first Iceberg video. In case you haven't seen that, what are you waiting for? I'm late! Can I just have a moment to say something on behalf of me and everyone who's watched the previous Iceberg video and is watching this current one? What? What? What the? Huh? How? What? What is this? That's like a large number. I can't even count that high. Unfunny attempts at illiteracy jokes aside, thanks, like, a lot. Really means the world for a guy like me to get this many views on a video I poured my heart, soul, and blood of the innocent into. When I released the first video, I legitimately didn't expect it to do so well. Especially because I didn't expect anyone to be able to tolerate my voice for a minute, let alone an entire hour, but I was wrong. So, from the bottom, most decrepit, dark, and unreachable places of my heart, thank you. Like last time, I'll be marking theories accordingly in the bottom left corner, but this time I won't be adding any topics of my own just cause I don't feel like it. Also, I'll do something different this time, since I don't want to make a third part on this for the foreseeable future. If I got something wrong, which I definitely did, and people end up pointing it out, I'll create a comment summarizing all the corrections and pinning it, so that way everyone can point and laugh at me. Anyway, before we start with the video, correction time, and also stuff I didn't know about before. As expected by me, and expertly pointed out by many of you, I got some things wrong in the last Iceberg video, specifically these topics, and probably more. So let's quickly go over them one by one, shall we? In my entry about visions, I stated that a vision takes the shape according to the region which the character wielding originates from. While yes, the shape of vision a character uses is indeed based on one of the regions, it has more to do with where the character is currently located at the moment when the vision is bestowed upon them, rather than where they were born. Tomo, for example, wields an Inazuman Pyrovision, even though he's from Mondstadt. That's because his vision came to him while he was already in Inazuma, so yep. And yeah, I know about the whole visions are like ambitions thing, that'll come up later on. Believe me when I say, I read the entire Genshin Impact manga. Twice. Actually more than twice, and never for a moment I stopped to think to myself while editing the previous video, haven't we seen this guy before? The answer is yes, more than once actually. Yikes. While other people did share the same sentiment as me, some people pointed out that Kaya's disaster of a haircut has a meaning behind it. According to these comments, Kaya's hair is what you call a love lock, which Eula also possesses. A section of hair is longer than the others and is made to rest over the left shoulder to show devotion to a loved one. Who's the loved one, though? I don't know. It's me. It's always me. User Dancing Lights AMV left a comment on the original video explaining how I was wrong in my entry about the origins of the Ruin Guards. Here's their explanation. I mentioned that I had no idea why the Air of Alicia was in the Iceberg, but as usual, the comment section came in clutch with their theories. Again, many thanks. People who played Honkai Impact 3rd left their comments on the video. Here. Pause the video if you wish to read, or just go look it up on the internet, or go play the game yourself, it's really fun. In the entry about Dane's life and Asmodee being the heirs of the kingdom in heaven or something, I mentioned that Lumine is canonically the one who turns into the Princess of Darkness, and many have pointed out to me that's actually incorrect. No Traveler is canonical in that regard, and that's just a mistake on my part. Although Lumine is still the better Princess of the Abyss. I didn't know what to put here in the previous episode, so you guys did it for me. Here's some of the theories. I didn't know what to put here either, so you guys did it for me again. How nice of you. No, I didn't forget about these two entries. I just removed them. In my mind, it wasn't necessary to add them because it's something that you learn by just playing with the characters, which you should. And also, can you imagine if every character had their origin story in the Iceberg? Nevertheless, here's a quick summary on Chi-Chi's origin and the Raven and Fischl story. I started writing the script for the previous Iceberg video before Inazuma was even released, and started production from about August until the day before it was released. Can you tell I procrastinated a lot? So I was quite surprised when someone pointed out to me that I referred to the current writing shogun Ai as Ball, since after chapter 2 act 3 of the Archon quest in Inazuma, we now know she's actually Beelzebul, and Ball was Raiden Makoto, her twin sister. What happened is that while the video itself was released after chapter 2 act 3, I wrote something about Ball in the script before chapter 2 act 3 was released and didn't realize it while editing. Maybe a mistake on my part, which, as you can clearly see, is not uncommon. You may have noticed two things on my previous videos overall. One, English isn't my main language, and two, I am really dumb. So here's some spelling corrections about specific characters. It's Oziel, not Oziel. It's Diluc, not Diluc. What? And surprisingly enough, someone also pointed out it's Andrews, not Andreas, because it's a Lithuanian name apparently. If true, very curious. Thank you for that. Whew, I think that's all. Now we can probably start. Welcome one and all to the new Genshin Impact Iceberg, which is not really that new since a lot of the previous entries are reused and it was created like, what, 5 or 6 months ago. And also I'm going to be talking about these entries in specific. But yeah, anyway. Oh yeah, you can keep the video in the background now. Nothing that I'm going to be showing like visually is important. Non-humans in Teyvat. In my last Iceberg video, I did talk about how Klee and Diona are partially elf and cat respectively, but now that the entry says non-humans in a broader sense, I can talk more about other characters. Some of the ones who come to mind instantly are Sucrose, Goro, Ganyu, Ito, and Yaimiko and Yanfei, all of which feature animal or adepti characteristics. But if we take the meaning of non-human literally as someone not only with animal features but that is also literally not a biological human born in conventional ways, i.e. fatherless and motherless, which is just Twitter users, we could also add Albedo, Scaramouche, the Archons, the Adepti themselves, and yeah. On my video about the new skins for Genshin Impact, which you should totally check out by the way, I had someone, I can't remember who it was right now, but the screenshot should be up on the video, gave me an idea of a video talking about the Genshin Impact characters with animal characteristics, what animals they represent, the meaning and lore behind them, and etc. So due to that, I won't delve further into the topic just yet. Oh yeah, and about the other non-humans of Genshin Impact. They sure exist. Artifacts lore tell the stories of their first users. You ever stop to actually read the description of the artifacts you collect, instead of mindlessly farming your desired stats and substats for days on end and gawking at the slight possibility of rolling 4 times into crit damage? If you didn't, I suggest you do. There's a lot to know about the lore of the game in these descriptions, given that they are literally the manifestation of bygone days telling the histories of its previous owners, like the Lava Walker set telling the history of the Lava Walker, a sage who traversed the Sea of Flames called the Mari Javari after being doubted by his peers. There's a lot to see with these artifacts. I strongly encourage you to take a look for yourself. Ember's headband is part of her head or hair. I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe? If you consider nothing but this idle animation where the headband moves on its own as if Amber is controlling it, sure, but that's likely just a cute part of the idle animation, I assume. I mean, do you think Yanfei can just summon this giant book at will? I mean, yeah, she probably can. Delusions. I did talk a fair bit about delusions in my previous Iceberg video, but I just want to talk more about them. If you don't know, delusions are vision-like artifacts created and mass-produced by the Fatui. They are granted by the Teresa herself to the 11 Fatui Harbingers and other Fatui members she considers worthy. They are supposedly created using the remains of deceased gods and other powerful beings, however that may work. The delusions distributed by the Fatui in Yashiori Island, for example, are made using crystal marrow, which contains the Tatarigami curse originating from the slain god Orobashi, two things I will talk about in due time. And like visions, delusions grant their wielders the ability to manipulate certain elements, as seen in Child's and Signora's boss fights. But they are supposedly far more powerful than visions in exchange for draining the user's vitality or possibly backfiring on them. As mentioned a moment ago, the Fatui have been distributing visions to every nation in secret, and the effects on the humans have so far been less than desirable, which, evidently proves that delusions are much more demanding for a common human in comparison to regular visions. Jiu? Before the release of version 1.5, Jiu was a permanent NPC residing under the Dragon Queller, a huge tree with blue veins located between Mount Hulao and Nantianmen. She used to babble on about how she didn't worship Morax and instead of being way more unknown to the current people of Liyue, called Aishtaha. After 1.5, Jiu became a quest-exclusive character. She appeared specifically during the second act of Zhongli's story quest, No Mere Stone. There, it is revealed that Jiu is a coalesced part of Aishtaha's spirit. She was originally sent out to see if the people of Liyue still remembered Aishtaha. Enraged after finding out they did not, Aishtaha started his plan to escape from his seal. That's when we come in and defeat the darn thing for good, I think. Vergoldet. Vergoldet is an NPC in Liyue, the owner of the Wangshu Inn at Dihua Marsh, also known as Boss Lady. She sells dishes, ingredients, recipes, and notably knows a lot more about what she shouldn't. That's because both Vergoldet and her husband Hua Yan, along with the rest of the Wangshu Inn staff, are agents of the Liyue Qixing, aiding Xiao in his mission to suppress the emanations of evil gods. No, I didn't make that up. They also gather intel for Ningguang, as stated by herself in a quest called Equilibrium. This explains why no one from Mondstadt knows Vergoldet, even though she insists she came from dirty Liyue. She could either be born in Liyue and faking it to hide her identity, or she could be from a different nation entirely, which admittedly is kind of hard to tell since everyone looks the fucking same! Vishaps are dragons. According to the wiki, Vishaps are a species of dragon-like creatures that once followed each of the 7 sovereigns with their corresponding elements and were formerly the dominant race of the world. So far, we know about the many Geo-Vishaps found in Liyue and their lord Aishtaha, and the many baptismal Vishaps found in Enkanomiya. Judging by this, you can already see and understand what the entry means, but we can go a bit further than just that. The baptismal Vishaps, who formerly ruled over Enkanomiya and the Depths, are also known as the dragon hares of the depths. Alice has spoken about fish dragons living in the oceans and the lore for the wings of feasting, which fit the description for the baptismal Vishaps who exhibit those features. And if that wasn't enough, Vishap is literally derived from the Armenian word Vishap, an indigenous name for dragons, specifically those from Armenian mythology. Furthermore, here's all the other languages in the game and all the translations of the name Vishap. Hilichurls have their own conlang. A conlang is defined as a language that has been artificially created, a constructed language. And if you've done any of the quests regarding Elon Musk's attempt to communicate with Hilichurls, with varying degrees of success, other quests and events in the past, in-game books, and even the manga, you should know that the Hilichurls do have their own conlang called Hilichurlian. We don't fully understand it, but we do know that even the smallest mistake in spelling can result in them becoming instantly aggressive, so be careful. Not that taking care of the Hilichurls would be an extra difficult task. Timmy's mother. Talking about Timmy's quote-unquote mother is cool and all, but I find that the most interesting approach would be talking about his family overall. You know who Timmy is. He's one of the Fatui Harbingers. He is a kid that stands in the bridge near the entrance to the city of Mondstadt, feeding the pigeons. When you make the pigeons fly away, or just kill them, the right option, he'll get mad at you. The thing is, Timmy's family is kinda, he doesn't know about this, but his father died in a hunting accident. Draft tried bringing him back to Mondstadt in time for him to be saved, but didn't manage to do so. Ever since, Grace has been taking care of Timmy. While she's not biologically related to him, he considers her his mother. Timmy is still unaware that his dad died, due to Draft sending him a letter and some money from time to time, ever since the accident. And possibly since he knows who his father is but recognizes Grace as his mum, he probably never got a chance to meet his actual mother, but doesn't seem to question who she is either. The login screen is possibly what Celestia looks like. The entry explains itself, really. However, and I mentioned this in a previous video, even though the Celestia from the title screen is basically infinite and can't be seen in game, There are theories which question the true size of Celestia. Realistically, why would the residence of the gods be smaller than an actual region of Teyvat? Jiangshui, I really hope I'm pronouncing this right, is a mysterious but highly knowledgeable NPC located near the Wangshu Inn. He was once a vision bearer under a different name, but due to, quote, using his vision for bad things, he gave up his vision a long time ago and decided to move away and change his lifestyle completely, while reflecting on his sins. No one knows what he did, what his name was, or how he was able to even discard his vision, but it seems that the power has not completely left him. In a certain daily commission where you help Smiley Yanxiao, you get to talk to Jiangshui. Out of nowhere, a rune hunter appears, which Jiangshui deals with instantly without a vision nor weapons. I want this guy in my party. He also knows about the truth behind the Wangshu Inn and that it's used as a cover-up for a secret mission regarding Xiao and the Liwei Qixing. He knows about Yan Xiao's and Vergolda's pasts and is one of the few who notices that the traveler is able to manipulate the elements without using a vision. Allogenes/Genshins. Allogenes, or as seen in the title of the hit gacha game released in September 28, 2020, Genshin Impact, Genshins are the humans who possess visions and can therefore ascend to Celestia and become a god. The term allogene, as seen in Gnosticism, is used to determine someone who is half human and half divine, who can sometimes, under certain circumstances, become full divine. Referring to vision holders as allogenes is not something which common humans or vision holders do. Rather, it's a term almost exclusive to the gods. Venti introduces the term to the traveler at Grindrise by the oak tree where Vanessa is said to have ascended. It is also important to mention that the Archons have no control over who becomes an allogene. This was revealed to me a few days after the first Iceberg video was released, and is stated by the writing Shogun herself on her voiceover about visions.
So in all this time, no new electrovisions have appeared in the outside world? Well, what I can say on this topic is subject to certain constraints, but it is not by my will that visions are granted or denied.
So what, or rather who, is responsible for granting visions to common humans? And what even is their major goal? Why do they, quote, goad us all with the promise of their 7 treasures, rewards for the worthy, a doorway to divinity, end quote? Is it really because they want to forcefully control and divide the human race by luring people in, promising great power with the help of visions, but ultimately wanting to screen them away from Teyvat entirely? Who knows. The nameless island near Mondstadt. Basically, as soon as you start the game, you can turn around and see an island. Shocking, I know. Far, far away from Mondstadt. It's not shown on the map, and even if it was by now, you wouldn't be able to access it at least until you got Kai in your party. Getting there is a tedious process, but it rewards you with a luxurious chest, the achievement Seas of Stories brought by the wind, and starts the quest Time and Wind after collecting a certain item. Just make sure you have an Anemo aligned traveler when you get to the island, if you fail to get an Anemo character up to that point. The Wanderer's Troop. The Wanderer's Troop is an artifact set that comes in 4 stars and 5 stars. It grants 80 elemental mastery at 2 piece and a 35% increase in charge attack damage if the character uses a catalyst or a bow. But I know that's not what you wanted to hear. The Wanderer's Troop, faction, was a group of people adept in both music and combat that traveled all over Teyvat 1,000 years ago. Their most notable act was their failed rebellion against the Mondstadt aristocracy. And no, the Wanderer's Troop didn't rebel at the same time when Venti and Vanessa did, hence why it flopped entirely. The troop was comprised of at least 4 members: the Conductor, the Sojourner, the Dawnlight, and Krauslade. They performed many feats, including exploring the Marjavari, before arriving in Mondstadt during the time of Ludi Harpastum. There, the Sojourner fell in love with the maiden, who was eventually chosen to throw the ball at the end of the festival. And if you know how the Ludi Harpastum used to go during the aristocracy era, afterwards she would be claimed by a member of the aristocracy. Unable to tolerate such injustice, the Wanderer's troops stormed the city in hopes of overthrowing the aristocracy. They failed, however. The Conductor and Sojourner died in battle, while the Dawnlight was enslaved as a gladiator and Krauslight's punishment was left unknown. Oh yeah, side note, Krauslight was born into the Lawrence clan, the aristocrats, but decided to split from them and eventually took part in the rebellion, supposedly perishing horribly. The Sojourner was from Fontaine, but stated that he wasn't regretful of dying as a nobody in a foreign land. This story is told by the Wanderer's Troop and Resolution of Sojourner artifact sets, as well as the Wanderer's Troop series weapons. Golly. Golly is a character hailing from Sumeru, who has yet to appear in the game but is one of the main characters in the Genshin Impact manga. Her quest for vengeance against Barnabas, no Barbados, An agent of the Fatui is one of the driving forces behind the manga's main story. She was born sickly, therefore her parents requested help from Barnabas, who stated that she was touched by a thief, a sort of supernatural entity, and they should give her to him in order to save her. Unbeknownst to the family, however, Barnabas was working with the Fatui, Harbinger Dottore in particular, and instead of saving her, turned Golly into a test subject for their Archon residue experiments, injecting her with the substance. Eventually, after either being let go by the Fatui or somehow escaping, she found herself wandering alone. On account of her sickliness, she was treated poorly whenever she went, often being abused by passing pedestrians, having stones thrown at, and pushed around overall. This fueled her hatred for people and gods and a strong desire for vengeance. And also, she's probably claustrophobic, as if all that wasn't enough. I highly recommend reading the manga and seeing the entire trajectory of Golly for yourself, as if I were to explain everything, we'd be here until tomorrow. Dane's life. Come on, you know who Dane's life is. He has a whole Archon quest based on him. He appears more than characters from Atlan in the game. There's no characters in Atlan. Dane's life has a quest for him. Anyway, before I talk about Dane's life, I just want to say real quick, this entry shouldn't be down here. Like, really, a lot of people actually, the majority of the people who play the game know who he is, but yeah, anyway, I need to talk about him. Dane's life is an upcoming character in Genshin Impact and the narrator from the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, and most of the collected miscellanies except for Aloys. Although he was announced as a playable character in September 27th, 2020, one day before the game released, he is not expected to be playable until, oh, I don't know, a few hundred years from now. Apart from that though, there's not much I can say about him. Psych! Of course there is, are you kidding me? Firstly, he's from Khaenri'ah. That's so crazy. The only other character from Khaenri'ah is Kaya. Maybe they are brothers? They even have the same eye shape. What? When Dane's life was unable to save the people from the Eclipse Dynasty during the fall of Khaenri'ah, he was cursed with immortality, meaning he has witnessed and is able to recall moments in the history of Teyvat from thousands of years ago, including stories of Boreas, the Wolf King of the North, the Valing, the Dragon of the East, and all characters we can play as. He also despises the Archons and any deities that side with the Seven, including the Adepti, because of his homeland being destroyed by the gods. PTSD does things here, man, it's true. We haven't seen him in the history for almost a year. Yeah, that's just sad. In all seriousness, at the moment Dane's life is a criminally underexplored character who is, at the same time, incredibly pivotal to the story of Genshin Impact. Really wish to see more of him in the future, hopefully before Sumeru is released. Hey everyone, it's Maple. Just a little disclaimer, what I just said was written in the script and recorded before 2.6 was released, alright? I just knocked on my desk. It was recorded before 2.6 was released, so yeah, basically disregard what I said about Dane's life not being featured in the story for a year, so yeah. Peace. Triquetra. The Triquetra is a prominent symbol in Genshin Impact, being featured in three main ways: upright, upside down, and doubled, and in a variety of things such as domain entrances, the Blessing of the Walking Moon, Genesis Crystals, Bundles, Mora, Paimon's Clothing, Tartaglia's and Kaya's Burst, the Spiral Abyss, and the icon for the world quests. In real life, the Triquetra has been used throughout the world since ancient times. Although its original meaning has been lost, it has been used to symbolize the triple goddesses in various religions, the Holy Trinity, and other concepts of three. Visions are also ambitions. This refers to something we learned in version 2.0, specifically during the first released acts of the Inazuma questline, and also a little tidbit of speech from Yae Miko in the 2.0 trailer.
When a person's ambition reaches a certain strength, the gods look upon them with favor. In other words, a person's vision represents their ambition.
For to be stripped of one's vision is to be stripped of one's ambition.
What this means is that visions are quite literally an ambition given form, as explained by the game. However, that explanation is not fitting for a lot of cases. For example, people wanting to separate themselves from the visions, people who don't use their visions for anything, people who try to sell their vision, or people who even try to boil their vision. This leads many to think visions are an instrument which is bestowed upon people as a reflection of their ambitions, which makes sense seeing that most who wield visions are considered extraordinary by regular means, but that doesn't necessarily influence them in that regard. That way, it would explain why some characters are more indifferent than others in regards to keeping or losing their visions. Sumeru is inspired by post-Islamic Persia. In my previous video regarding the regions of Teyvat, I went into detail on how Sumeru is going to probably, certainly, most likely, almost definitely be based off of the Middle East and the areas previously belonging to the Persian Empire. However, although I believe that's the case, it would not be a stretch to say that Sumeru could very well be inspired not by the current areas of the Middle East, but by Persia after what is called the Muslim conquest of Persia. The Muslim conquest of Persia happened in the 7th century from 633 to 654 AD, and signalized the fall of the Sassanid Empire as well as the eventual decline of the Zoroastrian religion, giving space for Islam to eventually become the dominant religion in the region. After that came the Islamic Golden Age, described as a period of cultural, economic, and scientific flourishing in the history of Islam, lasting from the 8th to 14th century, which is what I think the entry could be referring to. Petrichor. Petrichor is a town in Fontaine mentioned by Xavier, the guy who helps you fix the Mikage furnace in Tatra Tales, and the description for the Jew of repudiation, a drop from the hydrohypostasis. Not much about the city is known, apart from the facts that it is the hometown of Xavier, home to a majestic waterfall, as mentioned in my last video. Go check out it, by the way, after you're done with this one. Not now. And that the term petrichor was coined by 2 Australian researchers in 1964, referring to the pleasant smell that emanates when rain falls on dry soil. Fairies. This entry could either refer to the Lockfolk, specifically the spring fairy whom Diona and Old Finch befriended some time ago, and maybe Endora, but it also refers to the Seelie, both the ones we find while exploring and the ones we learned as gadgets during the Lost Riches event. According to the wiki, in some languages, specifically French, Russian, and both versions of Chinese, Seelie directly translates to fairy. Additionally, the Seelie and their statues are named after the Seelie courts of Scottish folklore. The Seelie in Genshin Impact also follow the behavior of the Scottish Seelie courts, as they are described as fairies who seek help from humans and, in return, grant favors and kindness. Lisa's song. I think this entry refers to the fact that Lisa subtly weaves a secret song into her auto attacks, which you can listen to here. The Sakura's Corruption. This refers to the extremely lengthy quest chain in Inazuma called the Sacred Sakura Cleansing Ritual. It starts after you talk to Kazari in Kondo Village. The Sacred Sakura, a giant tree sitting atop Narukami Island that represents the power of the Electro Archon, has been believed by Inazumans for thousands of years to be able to cleanse the land of its impurity through the Thunder Sakura you find scattered around Inazuma, defending the safety of the earth and water alike. The Sacred Sakura and the Thunder Sakura remove evil and purify the land by absorbing filth into its roots. However, the accumulated filth in the roots does not dissipate on its own, so it's necessary to routinely perform the aforementioned Sacred Sakura cleansing ritual to purify the filth. The Thunderbird. The Great Thunderbird, also known as Kana was a giant bird of prey with violet feathers, reminiscent of the electro element and the aesthetic of both Tsurumi and Seirai Island. She was also a storm god and the guardian deity of Tsurumi Island, being worshipped by many throughout the centuries. As seen in a series of quests when you first explored Tsurumi Island, she was the one responsible for the island's destruction and the death of all its citizens in conjunction with the destruction of Seirai Island. These guys don't seem to care though. She was eventually killed by Ai and sealed away at Seirai Island. The remnants of her power either formed or created the Thunder manifestation. The Ermin Soul and Ley Lines are able to store knowledge. In my last Iceberg video, I did talk a fair bit about the Ermin Soul and the Ley Lines that flow out of it, the energy and vitality that is stored within them and all that. What I didn't mention though is that the Ley Lines and, by extension, the Ermin Soul trees can somehow remember literally any and everything that has ever happened in the history of ever. This is evident by this loading screen tip, which states, for all my listeners out there, quote, "It is said that the ley lines remembered all things that happened in this world, from the surface down to the deepest depths," end quote. Don't know how that happens though. Har Islands. The name Har Islands refers to the limited area known as the Golden Apple Archipelago, which was accessible during the 1.6 update. Before the events of Midsummer Island Adventure, where the Traveler, Klee, Barbara, Jean, and later on Kaya, Diluc, Albedo, and Razor went to the islands at the request of the Dodo King, which was just Alice. The area was historically known as the Har Islands according to Venti. It's also where a lot of reused elements which later appeared in Inazuma, such as the Wave Rider and the Magoo Kenki, first appeared. Tatarigami. The previously mentioned Tatarigami refers to the curse caused when the giant serpent god Orobashi was slain by the Raiden Shogun. The Tatarigami manifests as a black aura around certain enemies in Yashiro Island and the persistent storm overshadowing the island when players first explore it. You may remember how annoying that was. Before the events of the game, the people of Inazuma created wards housed within 3 Narukami pillars to suppress the soul of Orobashi, while the Yashiro Guardians led by the Kitan clan also took up the mantle of suppressing the Tatarigami. However, the wards suppressing Orobashi were later destroyed by fanatics infiltrated in the Watatsumi army, along with help from the Fatui, leading to the Tatarigami spreading again by the time we reach Yashiro Island. The Mikage furnace, for example, runs on a Tatarigami core, which is why the Fatui took interest in it during Tatra Tales. Amber's grandfather abandoned her and went back to Liyue. Even though we never see him, Amber's grandfather was quite a remarkable person in Mondstadt. His most known feat was creating and being the first leader of the Outriders of the Knights of Favonius, that is a lot of words, and also being the compassionate mentor of Eula when most others in Mondstadt rejected her because of her relation to the Lawrence family. Decades before all that, however, he was the leader of a mercenary group in Liyue. One day, a job went wrong and he was the sole survivor, after which he was taken to Mondstadt under the care of a doctor from the Knights of Favonius. Due to being ashamed of returning home, and also to repay his debt, he stayed, joined the Knights of Favonius, and formed a family. Many years later, Amber was born, who he treated with the utmost care and mentored as an outrider from a very young age. Due to Amber, he also became acquainted with Eula, sharing a similarity in being an outcast and teaching her an open-mindedness and down-to-earth persistence, helping her to find herself and discover a way to persevere through the difficulties her bloodline caused her. 4 years before the start of the game, however, Amber's grandfather disappeared without a trace. Shortly after she had been admitted into the Outriders, he left his coat of arms and sword in his office and just vanished. However, based on a description in the Jingsei Village bulletin board, which matches Amber's grandfather, it is almost certain that he returned to Jingsei Village. The message states, quote, "An old friend came back to the village yesterday. We hadn't seen each other in 50 years, but when I saw the way he flew with his wind glider, I knew it had to be him. When we were young, we worked as hired muscle on board. He later went to Mondstadt to become some sort of knight, but now he's come back in his old age without even a word. I see him skulking around, but have no idea where he lives or what he does for a living now. After all these years, I still don't understand him." End quote. Rostam and Arundolin. Rostam and Arundolin were two good friends who grew up together and eventually served for the Knights of Favonius, as mentioned in the Braveheart artifact set. Rostam, also called Wolf Pup Rostam in his time, was a Knight of Favonius who lived more or less 500 years ago. He strongly influenced the sword combat style of the Knights of Favonius in following generations, mentored the White Knight, who eventually became the Bloodstained Knight mentioned in the Black Sword and the Bloodstained Chivalry artifact set, and was mutually in love with, unironically, La Senora, the Crimson Witch of Flames. Arundolin, also known as Lion of Light, was one of the previous Grandmasters of the Knights of Favonius. He was good friends and rivals with Rostam, but unlike him, wielded a great sword model of the one wielded by Ravenwood, a former Knight of Boreas. This great sword wielded by Arundolin would eventually serve as inspiration for the Pharaoh's Shadow. During the cataclysm which affected the entirety of Teyvat, Arundolin led his knights on an expedition to fight the monsters that threatened Teyvat in Kyanria. Unfortunately, Rostam died during the expedition to Kyanria, leaving Arundolin inconsolable as he gave up both his title of Grandmaster and his weapons. It is unknown how he died or spent the rest of his life after returning to Mondstadt. His departure from the Knights of Favonius meant there was no one capable of defending Mondstadt from the corrupted dragon Durin, leading Barbados to temporarily awaken and summon the Valiant to fight the corrupted dragon. Kitsune Saigu. The Kitsune Saigu, also known as Lady Saigu and the Hakushin Kitsune, was a prominent figure in Nazuma who was worshipped as a Kitsune goddess and dwelt in the Grand Narukami Shrine. Her appearance was first revealed in Raiden Shogun's Scatter teaser, and while she dressed as a typical Miko priestess, she was much more important than what one may think at a first glance. She was a descendant of the Hakushin clan, a prominent Kitsune clan in Inazuma, was a close ally of Ai, and served a mentor-like role towards a shrine maiden named Asase Hibiki. Little is known about her life, but we do know she died in a dark disaster, likely the, you guessed it, cataclysm that affected the entirety of Teyvat 500 years ago. She was consumed by a dark will, and both her body and memories were broken down and turned into filth. The craft weapon Hakushin Ring, whose blueprint you earn after completing the sacred Sakura cleansing ritual, narrates her life from her own perspective. The Time Archon. I'm pretty sure that I talked at least a little bit about the Time Archon in my previous Iceberg chart, specifically the theory about Paimon being the Time Archon unrelated to the Seven, so if you want the explanation, check this timestamp on the previous video. However, I now want to mention a god called Isaroth, which some people even do believe to be Paimon, but I digress. Isaroth either is or was a goddess with control over time and wind, likely one of the four shining shades of the Primordial One revealed in Economia. I will talk about the Primordial One in due time, do not worry. She is known by a plethora of titles, including Kairos, the god of moments, the Thousand Winds of Time, or just the Thousand Winds, Tokoyo Okami, the Undying Wind, and finally, the God of Time, alternatively, Master of Time or Ruler of Time. She has been worshipped in Mondstadt and Economia both before and concurrently with the rise of the Seven. Although she is slightly alluded to in the carvings on the sundials in Mondstadt, both the worship of her and even the knowledge of her existence has been all but forgotten in Mondstadt, mostly due to the aristocracy suppressing knowledge about Mondstadt's history and destroying historical records and relics, and due to what is called the Great Fire of Fall Equinox, reducing Mondstadt's library, which was once the largest in northern Teyvat, to a sixth of its former size, as mentioned in the lore for the Favonius Codex. The people of Economia continue to worship her even after being sunken into the depths. However, this practice seems to have waned following Orobashi's appearance and disappeared altogether after they moved to Watatsumi Island. And yes, I know she's not explicitly called an Archon, but if I didn't mention her, this entry would have been barren, so yeah, you're gay. Abodes and Pocket Dimensions. As of current year, we do know some things for certain about pocket dimensions. One is that it's usually, keyword usually, adepti or people with some type of adeptal power or relation that can create them, via an ability called subspace creation, hence why we get the Serenity Pod from Madame Ping. Two is that while it's usually adepti who can create pocket dimensions, we learn from Ice Plane of Euthymia that it's not a special trait reserved for adepti. Any being of high enough power can conjure special abodes or realms separated from our reality. How both of these are created is unclear though. The Drownings of Wumang Hill. Wumang Hill is a creepy, dark, and eerie location in the Bishui Plains in Liyue. It's fitting because that's the place where I farm Hu Tao materials. Anyways, the entry refers to a disaster stated by Kongzi in Hu Tao's story quest, which destroyed the entirety village of Wumang. It refers to a legend in which a sea monster from a distant land ensnared the youths of Wumang Hill using a certain song, luring them into the nearby Bishui River and drowning them. This happened year after year until all that was left were the elderly who passed on from natural causes, which explains why the area of Wumang Hill is completely deserted. This monster is probably the Hydro-Oceanid, considering its physical description and current location. The ley lines in the area absorb the hopes and dreams of those who died, recreating them with elemental energy. This phenomenon can ensnare travelers passing through the area, leading them to their doom much like the Wumang villagers of old, according to Volume 3 of the Records of Juyun. Chi/Chingsa. Chi, also known as Chingsa, are a type of dragon-like sea monster that lived around the Liyue region and the oceans beyond it. Thousands of years ago, one lived in the area currently known as Chingsa Village before being defeated by Morax, even if not entirely. According to an incomplete piece of writing that in Chingsa Village, quote, Rex Lapis overcame the Chi, but the Chi could not perish in its entirety. Thus did Rex Lapis conquer each of its facets in turn. Its spirit was bound in the north, its bones were pinned in the southeast, its flesh was incarcerated in the northwest, its soul was feathered in the northeast, and its form was crushed in the southwest. As additional measures of protection, Morax taught the people of Chingsa Village to make geostatues to crush the Chi's remaining power, many of which can still be seen. Crystalline Orange Adeptus Amber can also be seen around Chingsa Village, which also helps suppress and crush the Chi's power. During a world quest called Chi of Yore, which veterans may remember as a big headache in an early game. God, remember fighting those 3 rowing guards? and a rune hunter with amber. But yeah, anyway, during that quest, the traveler enters the vault in northwest Jinso. If you haven't done that, by the way, go do that. Big chest to be found in the Geoculus. Anyway, within it is a giant glowing orb suspended in midair, underneath of which is the Jinsei cache mechanism. Upon activation, the PTSD-inducing fight begins. After completing the challenge, the treasure room is opened, but the traveler and Paimon report to Grania Rosing? I'm so sorry, Chinese people, I have no idea how to pronounce this. That no traces of the chi were found, leaving the glowing orb within the vault a mystery to this day. Like, literally, what does it mean? It's just standing. The madness of the academia. The word academia itself refers to the Sumeru Academia, obviously, and so basically the madness of the academia is caused both by their incessant drive to obtain more knowledge in all subjects, and also by the almost unbearable and sickening aspects of actually graduating from the academia, the most notable one being thesis defenses. Hence, a lot of students go mad, give up, or even turn gray-haired in their 20s as a result from studying in the academia. I'm also desperately trying not to involve death in this. If you think about it, it's almost like Sumeru is trying to mimic real life. Unless you've never been to college.